All right, so today we're diving into something, everyone's probably at least heard of sexting,
Yeah.
even if they haven't set one themselves.
Right.
But we're going to take kind of a different approach than you might expect with this deep dive.
Okay.
We're really going to be looking at how sexting can be a really different experience for men,
Yeah.
women, and non-binary individuals.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how something as seemingly simple as like sending a sexy text message
Right.
can actually tap into
Yeah.
like really deep societal norms
Yeah.
and how we like navigate intimacy in this digital age.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so interesting about this, because you think of sexting and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's just like,
Like a casual thing.
yeah, it's just a casual thing, but it's not. It's really
Sonya.
about gender roles and how we express desire and like
Exactly.
all these kind of bigger issues.
Yeah, let's start with men, for example.
Okay.
You've probably heard that stereotype that men are always the initiators,
Hmm.
the ones driven purely by physical desire.
Right, right. The whole like men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing. Like, is there any truth to that though?
Well, I think there's definitely like a kernel of truth in there.
Okay.
Um, Men are often raised with these traditional gender roles
Hmm.
that teach them to be the pursuers,
Okay.
to view sexuality as something to conquer.
Right.
And that can create this immense pressure to prove their masculinity.
Oh, wow.
And for some men, that pressure can kind of spill over into sexting,
Got it.
making them feel like they should be the ones initiating or pushing the boundaries.
So it's not even really about the desire. It's more about
Right.
meeting those expectations of what it means to be a man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that pressure can really take a toll on their emotional well-being.
Oh, I bet.
Imagine constantly feeling like you have to perform a certain way,
Yeah.
even in your intimate relationships.
Yeah.
That can lead to anxiety, insecurity, even difficulty connecting on a deeper level.
That's a really good point. It's like they're stuck in this performance loop,
Yeah.
even when it comes to something as personal as sexting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that that's just one side of the coin.
Okay.
Many men also use sexting to feel desire to connect emotionally with their partners.
Okay.
I've worked with a lot of men who are actively trying to break free from those restrictive gender roles
Huh.
and use sexting as a way to be more vulnerable and open with their partners.
So it's not always about just like, conquest. It can actually be about
Right.
communication and intimacy as well.
Exactly.
So say.
And that's where it gets really interesting when we start to look at how women experience sexting.
Okay.
Because there's a whole other layer of societal expectations and pressures that they have to navigate.
Yeah, I can imagine, because we've all heard about that double standard
Yes.
that women face when it comes to sexuality.
Exactly.
So how does that kind of play out in the context of sexting?
Well, women are often caught in this double bind of being expected to be both desirable
Okay.
and modest.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're constantly walking this tightrope,
Yeah.
trying to find that balance between expressing their desire and worrying about being judged or shamed for it.
So on the one hand, sexting could be empowering for women
Right.
because they're like taking control. They're choosing to express their sexuality.
Exactly.
But then on the other hand, there's always that fear of potential consequences.
Yeah, and that fear is very real.
I bet.
Women are often hyper aware of how their actions might be perceived,
Right.
how their sexting could be used against them,
Yeah.
how it might affect their reputation.
Right.
It's a lot to carry, even in what seems like a private digital space.
So even when a woman is choosing to engage in sexting, she's kind of doing it with this framework for
Right.
potential judgment and scrutiny.
It can make it really difficult to fully embrace and enjoy the experience.
Right. So for women, it becomes this like complex negotiation
Exactly.
between agency and vulnerability,
Yes.
desire and caution.
Exactly. A constant balancing act.
Wow, that's already a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
And we haven't even touched on how non-binary individuals experience this.
I know.
So I feel like that's going to add a whole other layer
Oh, absolutely.
of complexity to this conversation.
It's about to get even more interesting.
All right, well, stay tuned.
Yeah.
We're going to get into that
Exactly.
right after the break.
And when we talk about non-binary individuals and sexting, we're really stepping outside those traditional gender binaries.
Right.
And that can bring up a whole new set of challenges.
Because it's like those scripts that we have
Exactly.
about how men and women should behave. They just don't apply
Right.
in the same way.
Yeah. And imagine trying to express your desire, and intimacy
Yeah.
in a way that feels authentic to you,
Right.
but you're constantly worried about whether you're meeting someone else's expectations
Right.
based on their perception of your gender.
Yeah, that must be so frustrating.
It is.
It's like you're being forced back into a box that
Yeah,
you don't fit in,
exactly.
especially when you're trying to be vulnerable
Right.
and intimate with someone.
And one of the biggest challenges that I've seen non-binary folks face is this pressure to overperform,
Okay.
either masculinity or femininity,
Oh, wow.
based on their partner's assumptions or expectations.
So it's like even in this digital space
Right.
where you think you'd have more freedom,
You would think.
you're still running up against these
Totally.
societal norms.
Absolutely. It can make sexting feel really limiting or even alienating.
Right.
For some non-binary individuals, it might feel like they have to exaggerate certain aspects of their expression
Okay.
to fit into their partner's understanding of what's considered sexy or desirable.
So it's not even just like the words
No,
that you're using.
it's the whole presentation.
Yeah, it's the whole
The whole thing.
web of assumptions and expectations.
Totally. And that's why consent and open communication are just so vital for non-binary people when it comes to sexting.
I bet.
It's about creating a space where they feel safe and respected
Right.
to express themselves authentically without fear of judgment or pressure to conform.
So it sounds like it's really about creating a dialogue with your partner.
Yes.
It's like making sure they understand and validate your identity
Yes.
and how you want to express yourself.
Exactly. Moving beyond
Yeah.
those assumptions and stereotypes and really seeing each other as individuals.
This is making me think about how so much of what we've talked about applies to anyone who's trying to navigate intimacy and desire,
Right.
regardless of gender.
Absolutely.
Like communication is just key
It is.
in any relationship, but especially when you're exploring something as personal as sexting.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really important point. Whether you're sending a flirty text or sharing a suggestive photo
Right.
or just expressing your feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crucial to have open and honest conversations with your partner
Yeah.
about your expectations, boundaries, comfort levels.
So healthy sexting, just like any form of intimacy, requires
Yes.
communication, respect,
Absolutely.
and a deep understanding of ourselves and our partner.
Exactly. It's about creating a space where everyone feels safe, seen, and respected.
I love that.
And that goes beyond sexting.
Yeah.
This applies to all of our interactions, both online and offline.
What I think is so fascinating about this whole deep dive is that it's not even just about sexting.
Right.
It's about how we approach relationships and intimacy
Yeah.
in a world that's increasingly digital.
Yeah. We're all navigating these complex social norms and expectations,
Right.
trying to figure out how to express ourselves authentically,
Yeah.
connect with others on a deeper level.
It's so true.
And that's why it's so important to have these conversations to bring these issues to light
Right.
and challenge the assumptions and stereotypes that can limit us.
You're so right. So where do we go from here?
Okay.
What are some key takeaways that
All right.
our listeners can apply to their own lives?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to sexing
Okay.
or to any form of intimacy for that matter.
Right.
It's about recognizing that everyone experiences these things differently and that our experiences are shaped by our gender, our culture, our personal histories.
So instead of relying on those old scripts
Yeah.
or making assumptions about what our partner wants,
Right.
we need to be more mindful
Yes.
and communicative.
Exactly. It's about asking questions, listening actively,
Yeah.
and being willing to adjust our behavior based on what we learn.
Right.
And it's about creating a space where we can all feel empowered to express our desires and boundaries in a way that feels authentic and safe.
I love that it's about shifting the focus from performance and pressure to connection and understanding.
Exactly.
And recognizing that these conversations are ongoing
Yes.
as our relationships evolve,
Right.
as the digital landscape changes.
Exactly. We need to be constantly reevaluating our approach to intimacy and communication.
That's such a powerful point. So as we've kind of wrap up this deep dive
Okay.
into sexting across genders,
Wow.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to ponder. It's interesting when you think about how much of our communication happens online these days.
Right.
I mean, it makes you realize how important it is to think about how we're approaching intimacy in this digital space.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not just sexting anymore. It's like flirting, even just expressing affection
Yeah.
through text or DM. It's all part of how we relate to each other.
I think that raises a really important question for all of us.
Okay.
How can we make sure our digital interactions, especially when they involve intimacy, are respectful, consensual, and truly like reflective of who we are
Hmm.
and what we want.
Yeah, it's easy to fall back on those old scripts and assumptions.
Right.
But it's like the digital world is a whole different ballgame.
It is.
We can't just assume that everybody's on the same page or that our intentions are always clear.
We need to be having those conversations.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're uncomfortable, but they're so necessary
Right.
about what we're looking for, what our boundaries are,
Exactly.
and how we can create a digital space that feels safe and empowering for everyone involved.
This deep dive has really highlighted how it's not just about like the words
Right.
that we say in those texts or DMs.
It's the whole context.
It's like the context, the power dynamics.
All the unspoken expectations that we bring to those interactions.
And those things vary so much from person to person.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that the rules of engagement are changing.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to evolve our communication styles and our understanding of consent to keep pace with those changes.
So it's not even just about sexting.
No, it's not.
It's how we approach all of our online interactions.
Yes.
From dating apps to social media to how we communicate with our partners and friends.
It's about bringing that same level of awareness, sensitivity, and respect
Yeah.
to all of our digital exchanges.
That's such a good point.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the societal pressures that shape our experiences with sexting
Right.
to the importance of open communication and respecting individual boundaries.
And I think most importantly, we've challenged ourselves and our listeners
Yes.
to think differently about how we approach intimacy and connection in this world that's, increasingly digital.
It's not always easy,
It's not.
but it's a conversation worth having.
It really is. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive
Of course.
into sexting across genders.
Yeah.
We hope it sparked some new insights and inspired you to think a little more critically about your own digital interactions.
Absolutely. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.